the ones we've had. This will cover the relative risk and the organization assessment. So we'll get started here. Just a little start off with a reminder. We have the FAMIT portal for NextGen user groups on this web page, and I can drop this in the chat again too. I know some folks have issues with chat, so if you need a link, send me an email later. But on this page, we post all the presentations, the feedback form, and the recordings for each session. Everyone has about 3 weeks to watch the video and fill out the form to give us feedback. Feedback is critical. We're still in the development phase. The stuff you see here is not etched in stone, so you have time to make a difference by filling out that form and sending in feedback. So with that, let me try and drop this in the chat before I move on. And there's a link to this web page. Other thing, I won't be using the actual application. Things change, databases get updated, and sometimes things disappear. Particularly like the fire I used for this incident is no longer on the board. So with that, let's look at the form real quick. We're going to be asking you about your first impressions, just some basic A, B, and C kind of answers so we can get some quick metrics. And every answer should have a comment and suggestion where you can add additional. So we'll look at the flow process, links to displays and bookmarks we'll cover. We'll look at the PMS 236 guidance real quick and a few other things. And that'll be what we're looking to get intel on this time. So let's move into my presentation. All right. With that, the new version of relative risk and the org assessment is going to follow the PMS 236 document, which came out probably shortly after the original relative risk and OA were implemented in the current version of WFDSS. So things kind of got shuffled early on, and we didn't exactly follow it, but the new version will follow this more tightly. With that, in order to get started and show everybody a demo, we need to find an incident in the application. I use this Moose Meadows fire for this presentation. And you do that by either being one of the group collaborators on it, and you can go to My Home and navigate easily, or you have to type your name of your fire or part of it into the search feature, and then it'll return your fires with that in it that are in your current view. I think I've touched on this in the past. Now you kind of probably wondering how you actually get in there and then start looking at an incident. Well, let me go back one. The other point I wanted to make was when you start hovering over the incident name, they'll turn blue to let you know they're a clickable link. Because this is a slide, you won't be able to see that. But once it becomes a clickable link and you click on it, you'll come into this incident information page. I'm already, the particular login I use is already part of the group collaborators. So I can just click view, but if you're the first one into an incident, you'll have to go and initiate record. That would show up in this top corner in the upper left. Moving on, once you get into that view or kind of edit mode, it is, you'll see across the top of the screen some tabs: incident info, analysis, relative risk, strategy, elaborations, OA, rationale, periodic assessment, and more. So if you notice, incident is dark, it's black, analysis is gray, relative risk is black. As you start navigating to each one of these tabs, they'll turn black and not be grayed out anymore to let you know that you've visited or somebody visited each one of those sections. So right now we're on the relative risk portion. And then you can start seeing the different versions or the different inputs. We have probability, hazards, and values, which go along with the PMS 236. So then we'll evaluate time of season, seasonal severity, various fire spread, and these are all part of what you see in the relative risk in the current version of WFDSS. They just look a little different here because they more closely tie to that document. So moving on, as you open each one of those caret icons, this one is time of season. You'll have 3 radio buttons. You'll be able to pick which input you want, and they're working on, these are a little bit mocked up, so this is not what you would see in the application right now. I do believe they're working on putting some of the guidance from the PMS 236 document into the application. So you'll get what you would see in each section of that, of the inputs from that document. Like I said, so it's on-screen help. So it'll give you a kind of an inkling of what you need to put in with the narrative. So I hope that makes sense. Oh, one thing I did not mention is I'll go through all my slides and we'll do questions at the end. But if you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat. I'm sorry, I missed that at the beginning. And then we'll cover them at the end. So, all right, let's move on. So you got time of season and seasonal severity. The one thing that are working on also with the new version here of NextGen, they're also going to start providing you with images, maybe links or map bookmarks to get helpful information to help inform whether it's early, middle, or late for time and season. And they'll do this for each one of the elements. So in particular for time of season, you'll get the timeline graph that you currently can only get in the RMA dashboard, but it'll be automatically calculated for the end user. If you use it in that risk management dashboard RMA right now, you have to put the inputs yourself, but the goal is WFDSS will automatically calculate this and present it to you as you go along. So you'll get different things like maybe the ERC forecast and various items that you see in Wildfire Safe and RMA dashboard at this time. So with that, we'll continue on. You have the rest of your regular inputs, barriers to fire spread. That might be a map bookmark. You might get a link to show you some of the barriers on the landscapes and different data layers that are available now. So those are the probability inputs. We'll move on to the hazard assessment. You get fuel conditions and fire behavior. Again, there's the breadcrumbs of what you need for the narrative from that PMS 236 document. Then you move on to potential fire growth is finished off that section, and then into values. You'll see infrastructure, natural resources, and cultural concerns. Here's where you might get that map bookmark link. That would, you click on it and it would load those data layers for you to view. Proximity of and threat to fire values, social economic concerns, all the same elements you've been dealing with in the relative risk to date, just a little bit different look and feel to it. So in the end, instead of having those charts like current WFDSS has, you'll get a summary which aligns with the PMS 236 process. It'll tally up your inputs and show you what your results are, so you can make a final decision about what your relative risk rating would be. And here it highlights that you're probably going to be moderate, and you can then make your choice and document why you're selecting that. So over here, you'll now see mark as complete and save. You'll need to, and this is my understanding because it's not all functional at this point. You click save, it'll save your inputs. And when you mark as complete, it'll send your your results then populate in the organization assessment and other areas of the application. So that's how it would work right now. So you would save your inputs, and you would want to save, maybe you're going to go out on a flight and you're going to come back and reevaluate some of these, but you want to save what you have right now. So you'd click save. But if you, maybe you've put everything in and you're confident with the results, so now you would mark it as complete. And then anybody else who came back in after you would know that you completed it and it was good to use. And it would also then automatically move forward. So it's kind of like the check-in, check-out process right now in the decision editor. It kind of just clarifies that you're checked in and good to go and moves the content forward. Hope that makes sense. Okay, moving on. We'll now move over to the org assessment. You'll notice that top line I highlighted earlier, the incident analysis relative risk strategy is now black. Someone visited that section. Elaborations is now black. And we've moved on to the org assessment, the OA. So in this section, for relative risk, you'll be presented with your results from the previous process and the relative risk. Right now, this is not exactly how the final end of the relative risk rating session will work. This slide on the right is not, this is the current testing version. What you'll be presented with is what your rating was and what your justification is. Because data is not perpetuating in the system right now, but there's had to be a little workaround to be able to test everything. So this is, things are not as they will be. So, and like I mentioned earlier, this is a great time to provide input because still in development, things can change. So, but basically the process is very similar. So you get your results from your relative risk, and that would be static. And we'll move on to the rest of the org assessment inputs. You have implementation of difficulty, the potential fire duration, then the course of action would come in next. And you would put in your notes and everything, as we've talked about. You get your functional concerns. You get your move into social political stuff. So you get your objective concerns. A lot of this is where, well, I'll get back to that too. External influences, ownership issues, and ownership concerns. Again, you could probably have links to maps here, which would pop up the ownership layers quickly for you. And then you get your summary result. So it goes through and tallies your inputs. You can see over here on the left-hand side, my implementation of difficulty, I had a potential fire duration as moderate, incident strategies, I had marked moderate, functional concerns are low. Then it comes over here on the right-hand side and tallies all those up for you and highlights where by the calculations you should be. I do believe you might have an option to change that, and then you can then go on and put in your recommended inputs. So you'd click save if you want to come back and visit it later. But if you are totally done, you mark it as complete and it moves on in the decision process. So, oh, I talked about that a little too soon. And they're my own slides. So yeah, this is a section here where you would then decide what you thought it should be and put in your response. On this particular one, I toggled it over to a type 3 incident. And then I would put my narrative as to why down below. So critical thing is always click save if you want to come back to it for sure. And then if I'm totally done with it, I'd mark it as complete. So pretty straightforward. Just doesn't have the little graphs we're used to. It's more exactly like the document is. So in a recap, we're gonna follow the PM 236. So if anything would change with that, maybe as this critical incident management thing comes forward, there'll be changes to PMS 236, which would then make changes in WFDS. You'll get the on-screen guidance from the document. You select the relative risk rating and the org type based on a summary of inputs. You're not locked into the summary answer from your inputs. You can make a change and then save it. Then you provide a narrative for your selection. Save and mark as complete. The thing of note, and I think I finally got this straight for Sam, is relative risk and the org assessment cannot be updated independent of the decision. They can be updated prior to publishing a decision, but after this decision is published and you want to make changes, you would then need to update the decision. Pretty sure that's the final way they're going to go with it. Because, you know, if you have changes to your risk or changes to your teams, that probably means your decision does need an update. So with that, we can move into some questions. I think I see Sam's been in there answering some stuff for me, which is great.
Yeah, Marlena, it looks like all the questions have been
Can you
answered.
add notes to each element? And yes, you can add notes at every point for every input. Oh, and Sam also noted the narratives will be required in order to mark the relative risk or org assessment as complete. Something I didn't note as important. So you can't just go through and pick your radio buttons. You have to put in a narrative. And yeah, I think Andrew, the OA will display a complex incident or type 1 at the time that it's revised. In that document, I mentioned that as we do change the types of teams, that'll get updated. And most users don't equate NA to very low or negligible. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly where there was an NA. I'm not sure if we need to. Oh, yeah, there are NAs. So, yeah, it is kind of hard to say that there's not applicable on ownership and in some of these inputs. However, I do believe it follows how the document PMS 236 goes. Do we have any other questions or that haven't been answered? You guys could come off mute if you need to. Raise your hand and come off mute. Okay. Well, I wanted to keep this sweet and to the point. I think I gave us a half hour when I scheduled this session. We got through a little bit quicker than I planned, but you never know how many questions you're going to get. So with that, I'll give everybody back some time in their day. Just another plug. Make sure you go and fill out this form, please. It's a good way to get your feedback into the system and get your agencies represented and how this final version of WFDSS rolls out. And I do see a couple more questions. Oh, they're still discussing the NA value. Will WFDSS be able to produce similar outputs that IFTDIS produces? And thank you, Sam. I'm not really sure what part of IFTDIS outputs we're talking about. Like the model runs. Not the model runs for the org assessment, but the fire behavior models. Yeah. So yeah, Sam mentions all 4 fire behavior models will be in NextGen. They just haven't been developed at this point. And no, we don't have a lot of insight of how PMS 236 will change as this complex incident management team thing is evolving. We just know it's evolving, and we're in touch. Sam and group are all in touch with the CIMT folks to make sure things are going to be changed as needed. So all those connections are made and being monitored.
Marlena, it looks like Eric has his hand raised.
Okay.
Good morning or afternoon, I guess, depending on where you're at.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Oh, maybe we got one more question, Eric.
Yeah, so since we're following the PMS 236 and the
Do
responses,
you want to come off mute, Eric, and ask a question?
you can't hear me?
Marlena, we can hear him.
Okay.
I can hear him.
I can hear
Let
him just
everybody
fine.
use their microphones as needed.
Okay. Well, I'll just throw the question out. So following the PMS 236, I'm guessing our responses, and I don't know maybe if this
My
has to do.
speaker's not working. Great.
Can you hear me now?
Did a BIOS update yesterday, and it must have tanked my speaker.
All right.
Maybe Aaron or Sam could take that, and I'll shut up.
Okay, here it goes again. I guess for the weighting of how we come up with calculations, because I've run into situations where really the complexity driving the incident isn't necessarily the active fire spread, but logistics or political concerns, kind of as we're wrapping into the fire, just the size of the fires, requiring the incident management side of it. So is that something we'll just potentially just be continuing to cover in notes, or is that something that might be changing and that's through NWCG?
Yeah, I don't know. Andrew just posted that link to that committee, Eric. That might be helpful. But you as a user, you can, adjust that rating to whatever you think it should be and then justify it in the notes.
Okay.
I'm not sure how they're going to adjust that weighting when they redo this in the CIMT process, right? The weighting could be completely different. But in the current version, I would recommend that you just apply the appropriate rating. And if it's a high or a very high, then do that. And even if it comes out as a moderate in the suggested relative risk, you as a user, it's within your scope to be able to say, this came out as moderate, but it didn't incorporate XYZ in the final rating because I couldn't weight it high enough. So I am giving this relative risk a high because I have these factors that aren't completely accounted for in the relative risk.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And where those, I guess, where our inputs would come versus, how they're calculated. And I do like the fact that each element now you can put some notes in as opposed to trying to kind of breaks it out. And that way you can speak to each one of those elements. And that's why I was wondering about that. So appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing this roll out.
Sorry about my technical difficulties on my end, guys. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. Sounds like we are done. Thanks for your time. Please fill out the form and have a good rest of your day. Our next session is probably at least a month off. I do believe we're going to start diving into the spatial fire planning portal at that point. So stay tuned. Thanks.
Thanks, Marlene.